a little bit, but feeling good in life, no real complaints.
I think we're
That's
live.
fantastic. We are live. Thank you for showing up, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us. We are talking about medical issues in our writing. "'Tis But a Scratch" is the title of this Lit RPG panel. And we have an incredible list of guests with us. What I'm going to do is allow them to introduce themselves, perhaps give us a little brief snippet of what their medical background is as to why they would be on this panel, and then we'll move forward from there. So, Xander, why don't you start us off?
I'm Xander Boyce. I write the Red Mage series, as well as a couple other series. My medical knowledge is I was a first responder when I was in the Coast Guard. So we would do I almost got EMT certified, but just a little shy of that.
Fantastic. Alaron?
Hey, I'm Alaron Kong. I write The Land and the God's Eye series. I'm an internal medicine physician. I did hospital-based work. So basically, if you came in, I took care of you if there was a heart attack, broken bones, infection, stroke, that kind of stuff. The bread and butter kind of hospital stuff.
Awesome. Christopher?
Hi, Sharon.
Hey, sorry guys. I am down at the International Convention Centre in Sydney because I'm at the World Family Doctors Conference this week. It is 7 a.m. in beautiful Sydney, but instead of some nice sunny shots, we have wind and rain, so I'm hiding near the McDonald's. I do family medicine, so I treat a bit of everything, a little bit of emergency, not much hospital work these days, and that's it. I'll pass over.
Fantastic. Thanks. Selkie?
I'm Selkie. I do not have a medical degree. My entire family is in medicine. My brother's a pharmacist, my mom's a vet, and my wife has 2 board certifications in family medicine and preventive medicine. And I write probably the most in-depth medicine-related lit RPG, where, I try my best to go into the real nitty-gritty details of everything that goes wrong when, you get hit with a fireball.
That's awesome. So for those of you who are joining us, you can put in a comment or a question, and we will try to get those answered by our professionals in this panel. In the meantime, I'm going to start us off with a question. Is there a situation where you have been reading a book, either in Lit RPG or otherwise, if it pertains, where you were shocked and dismayed about how inaccurate they were in describing some particular medical malady or injury or something like that? Alaron, why don't we start with you?
Honestly, I mean, there hasn't really anybody that seems like they're pushing it that hard. I mean, I guess there's places where like they stab somebody in a certain part of the body and they're like, and then they hit this organ and that organ isn't there. I mean, that seems, but like most people don't really know. I don't know. It's kind of like if you're writing about guns and you say clip versus mag, it drives some people insane. And for most people, I don't know. It's not that bad, but not a lot of people really get into it. I feel like for me, the thing that I get the most out of the medical knowledge is everybody likes gross medical stories. So like if you can make it where it's like, and then you did, and then his ball fell out, and they're like, "Oh my god!" and then that actually happens, then that's super cool, I guess.
That is very cool. Selkie?
So for me, in the lit RPG genre specifically, it's things around HP usually, and things around arms being mostly bitten off, and it's just like, you've had your arm bitten off, you can't use a 2-handed slash anymore. Like, and the whole concept of HP executed particular ways drives me absolutely nuts. Whether it's like, yes, I'm missing my heart, but it was only 20 HP damage, so I'm fine. It's like, no, you're missing a heart. Your blood pressure should be dropping. You should possibly be losing consciousness. You're not moving things around anymore. Like, I have consequences. It's not just.
Yeah.
I have lots of rants on this subject. I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Xander?
For me, it's almost always how people respond to trauma. Because again, that's my side of it, is dealing with initial traumas, dealing with people who have, been caught on fire, and like before they're sedated, before they're had anything, and also dealing with people that are around people that have been caught on fire. And there is like, it just like seeing the differences in ice from what I saw to how people write it, and like people that are just like shrugging off things that I'm like, no one shrugs that off.
Mhm.
Like you can go into shock and not realize that it happened for a while,
Mhm.
but you're going to pay consequences for it. So it's a lot of improper responses to initial traumas. That's what I noticed mostly.
Can I ask quickly, tie into that? Has there been a situation in your real working life where you have been shocked at the response or lack thereof of response of someone who's been grievously or horribly injured, and you're like, why are you not freaking out more?
Yeah, so it's always mothers. Mothers are crazy. So I had a lady with like a 6-inch head wound that had like a protruding metal plate out of it that was just bleeding profusely, and she wanted me to talk to her crying child instead of her. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, there's an order of operations that need to happen here, and it's so mothers always want their children to be treated before them, which is never, because if a child is crying, it's almost always fine.
Yeah, it's when they go quiet that you get scared,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's, if a mother has a crying child, they always want the child to be treated first, even if they have just ridiculous injuries.
Hmm. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
believe it.
there's been a lot of roided out guys that come in with, you know, maybe a broken finger or like a small laceration, and like it looks like it's the end of times to them, and they're just freaking out, and they've got like tattoos that says like death before dishonor and all this other bullshit, and they're just like all over the place. And then you'll get like some little bo peep, like little girl or some, or like, for me the most stoic have been honestly like people that sort of like fit the, like, you know, blue collar, like migrant worker or whatever. Well, I mean, they'll come in and literally like there'll be a finger hanging off or whatever, and they're like, yeah man, I got to get back to work tomorrow, so can we hurry this up? And you're like, this is a serious wound, guy.
Yeah.
But they're just sort of like, it's a Tuesday, you know. It's
Yeah, been
For
there.
me, it's
Christopher. Yeah, go ahead.
farmers or the husband when the wife's made them come in. If I see a patient and it's the first time I'm seeing the husband with the wife, I am immediately on guard. I call that wife sign positive, and generally about 50% of those end up in an ambulance going to hospital. But farmers are stoic. One of my colleagues once had a patient who wanted his finger amputated rather than sent off to a tertiary hospital because shearing season was that weekend. You know, he would rather lose the finger than not complete shearing season. So
I've heard,
Oh my word.
farmers coming in, like voluntarily coming into a hospital, is also a really big sign.
ooh,
Yeah.
I've heard it called farmer sign, where you know the farmer coming in. All right, let's triage red you from there.
I grew up on a farm, and my dad, one time, my brother and I were playing, and he had slid down this roof that was sheet metal, and one of the screws on the top that were a hexagonal shaped screw caught the heel of his hand, and in the meat of his hand right here, it had tore a large chunk of skin off. And my dad had worked with a lot of leather, and when we got to the hospital, or when we got to the house, he was like, oh, this is fine. And they're like, well, we should take him to the hospital. And like, no. We'll just take care of this. And he cut the chunk of skin off of his hand rather than take him into the hospital and get it stitched up. And it's like, that's the live tissue that you're cutting through, no anesthetic or anything. Just grab a pair of his leather scissors and cut that sucker off. My brother was definitely traumatized for that one. So I can appreciate, I grew up around farmers. There is something to be said about them being like, oh yeah, rub some dirt in it, it'll be fine.
I'm not gonna lie. There's been like I've done like my own shifts in the ER, and there's been plenty of times where like somebody needs like 2 or 3 stitches, and so you can like numb them up where you're sticking them to do that, and then you do one more, or you're like, it's basically the same amount, and they're like, is this gonna hurt? And you're like, yeah. Just like do it real quick rather than. I mean, you know, you got other patients to see. I don't know.
Plus, I mean, then you got to charge them for the anesthesia.
I'm helping you out, like, you know, and then you get to talk about how tough you were. I mean, net, it's fine.
Yeah.
But
I saw the comment there. I thought you were Canadian. That's some American healthcare expectation there. And I do have to say that, yeah, this is the strange thing, is it's not like in the US where it's like, oh, we don't want to have to deal with the deductible, or, oh, we don't have insurance, let's just take care of it ourselves. This was like, just go 10 minutes into the hospital and they'll stitch it up for free. We don't get charged for that kind of stuff. So it was really very unreasonable that was what had happened and transpired in that situation. Okay, so Sharon Schultz has asked, what favorite medical scene have you seen in Lut RPG? What's your favorite? Or one that you can recall or have a memory of? Anyone? Go ahead,
jump in.
Selkie.
I mean, I've written a bunch of scenes, because that's the whole, conceit of my story is a healer. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I suppose I'm going to be giving away some spoilers. One of my favorites was actually a terrible pun where the character walks into a trap and is decapitated and, is able to, heal herself back up, poof, one go, and makes the terrible joke about it being Axe body spray because, that blood was still going and pumping and spraying everywhere. And
Oh my word.
that was,
That's
I'll leave it on that one because, again, the whole series is about medicine and healing, and there's quite a few big moments in every book, and I'm finishing up book 11 right now, so I could talk all day about this, but I'll let someone else jump in.
Christopher, you were going to say something there?
Yeah, I'm reading He Who Fights with Monsters, book 9 at the moment, and there's a chapter there where he's just in counselling to deal with trauma, and I thought, that's something I hadn't seen for a while, and it is probably more realistic than the people who sort of battle through all their injuries and shrug it off. The guy actually goes to counselling to process trauma, and I don't always come to books to go read about counselling and psychology, but it was nice. I think that probably promoted a positive message.
I actually have a reference for this. You can't even find it anymore, so I feel bad for new Lit RPG readers. But Brent Roth was like one of the original gunslingers back in the day. He wrote Dragon's Wrath, and we actually think that he's passed on. He had a bad electrocution sort of issue in real life, and so he wrote his main character working with electricity, and he would talk about like what would happen to various like monsters and whatever when he was using it. And yeah, that was definitely something that was real life that I felt like was pretty good. He really focused in on some of like the entry wounds and stuff like that, and and I also just like to give a shout out to him because he was like one of the guys that sort of made all this possible a long time ago.
Wow.
Maybe it's because Aileron's on the panel with me, but there's a scene in, I think, book 6 of The Land where Richter kicks a guy's penis off.
Yeah.
And it's described in detail that I did not want. Let's just let's just say that. So that's the scene medically where I'm just like, oh no, I don't want to hear this.
Yeah, my nieces and nephews who are like, between like 14 and like 20, are reading this stuff, and they say like, my brothers just tell me that like they'll like come in to the kitchen just looking very disturbed, and they're like, what? And like, I think there's something wrong with Uncle Aileron. Like he hates cocks. I don't know. And I'm like, I don't hate him. It's not all of them.
Just
You have
everyone's
to be fond of at least one, right?
And I just have Highlander like rules. There can only be one. I mean, that's just sort of the way I roll.
There can be only one.
Remind me not to come to your parties. Just kidding.
As long as you're in a group, it's fine. You just don't let them pull you off
Just
to the
don't
side
be the
alone.
last one. Just go to sleep.
Oh, my goodness.
Going back to an earlier question you're asking about, like, who can like, or like people that like don't really understand how things are going to work. One of the things that I would see, because I worked at Grady in Atlanta, which is a safety net hospital, which if you're not from the U.S. is just a horrible term for basically like when all the other hospitals that have money have kicked you out, this is the last one that will catch you. So it takes care of all the disenfranchised human beings, which most are in the U.S. But I would see guys all the time that were under police custody in the hospital with 2 broken legs. And it was only by the third one that I realized that they had seen scenes on TV where people had run from the cops and then would jump out of a second story window and keep
Oh.
running. And I almost wanted to be like, you guys should tell your friends, you're going to break both your legs and still be arrested. So like, stop doing that. It doesn't work out.
You got to roll. You got to roll.
You're gonna get
Right?
arrested
And growing up, I was like, no,
either way.
if you roll just right, no, that doesn't work. Rolling doesn't counteract physics.
But
I
I've
mean,
seen it on YouTube. That
I've
works, doesn't
I've
it?
jumped off 2-story buildings without breaking my legs before.
All right, so he's part of the problem, and he's why.
To be fair, I have 2. However, I'm in Canada, so we landed in like 5 or 6 feet of snow, so it cushioned our fall.
No, so you start off at like a 10-foot jump, and you jump
You
off
work
and you
up
learn
to
to
it.
roll, and then you work up. Yeah, you don't start off at the 2-story, but you got to learn how to roll
You gotta-
right.
Dude, the
So
number
what
of
you're saying
people-
is these criminals need training. They need to
they
practice. their
need better
escape.
train. That's the problem with criminals these days. They don't take it seriously. There's
They're
no
all just
class.
like part-time criminals. I mean,
Yeah.
like what? Like the real mob, those guys know how to jump off a building. That's what I'm saying.
I used to wrestle back in the day, and part of the warm up was climbing a rope to the top of the gym, and then at the end, you'd slide back down and keep running around and whatever the coach had you do. And I found that if I just skipped the last knot on the rope, I would go a little faster, and I wouldn't have to be hauling myself back down. And over the months, I was dropping from higher and higher up until I would climb up, touch the ceiling, and then drop the entire length of the gym and keep going.
Good Lord.
But, if you want to jump from the second story, you have to build up to it and have a, nice mat at the bottom.
Yeah.
I do think
That's
about
helpful.
the stuff that we did when we were kids, and just like, man, there are so many multiverses where I'm just not here.
Yeah.
Like, anybody ever play a stupid game with their friends? Like, hey, let's go run at cars and see if we can slap as they go by, or other stupid stuff.
We didn't run at cars, but we did a joke where we would like try to like we would hit cars if they didn't give us enough time in the crosswalks. We just slap the back of the car to make it sound like they'd hit us, and see if any of them stopped and things like that. But yeah. But yeah, no, the number of things that I did as a child that I absolutely should have died from.
Just absolutely.
Yeah. Like I get why parents don't want their kids to go outside now, but like also like kind of survival of the fittest.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, right? And so, I mean, that's interesting, right? Because, like, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I imagine it's the same. Like, the more you learn about healthcare, like when you're initially doing it, you're like, oh my God. And then you see it so much, you're like, I don't have enough time in the day. I mean, this is a legitimate concern, but I just don't have enough time in the day to worry about it. So, like, talking to other people, it's like, they're like, so do I have anything to worry about? You're like, well, yeah, but you'll be fine. Probably. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It'll probably be okay. I'm sure it'll work itself out.
Hmm.
The body is resilient.
Yeah.
They say, like, I mean, that's little children. Their bones are kind of rubbery, right? They're designed to kind of have a little bounce back to them, so it's not as
Kids
horrible
bounce.
as-
Kids bounce
yeah.
way
They
better.
do. I mean, there's no denying that. Like, the things kids heal from is like, it's almost supernatural looking at it from the other side of it. Like, it's crazy what they can like survive and thrive from.
I think maybe that should be something that you guys consider in your next lit RPG, is like, that's a skill that you can end up, or an achievement that you can get, is like, my bones are childlike. And so then now all of a sudden people have like this rebounding rubberized bone structure based on children's abilities to heal and not be injured from insane things that they end up falling out of windows and
Isn't that just HP? They just have more HP, right?
well, I mean,
what I'm hearing is that the more child bones you have inside of you, the stronger you are.
Don't eat children, Elrond.
so
Don't eat
cannibalism is the
children.
way to go. Cannibalism is the way to
Problematic.
go. Okay.
Speaking
consider the
of
level of damage
integrating medicine with lit RPG, a common theme that a lot of lit RPGs has is, struggle makes strength. And some lit RPGs are you have to kill the monsters to level up, but more and more I see lit RPGs moving into the do what your class wants to do. So the chef back home doesn't have to go out and kill monsters. They level by cooking up and this sort of thing. And one interesting idea I've seen bandied about, sort of inspired by Iron Prince actually, is if you've got a really terrible degenerate disease, can your struggle against that count as adversity for leveling up?
That's
pretty good.
interesting. Christopher, you had something you wanted to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like child bones are more a form of damage resistant. They're not more, they don't have more HP. They just, when they get hit, they just absorb the damage.
They bounce.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that what HP would be in a theoretical system? Would be an ability to absorb damage without actually damaging your body?
Ooh, we're getting deep now.
Yeah, but that ruins the whole fun of actually getting to write about people like having to. How do they level up their skill of having childlike bones?
Yeah.
Is it something where they're consuming children, or is it something where they get maybe they're really nice to kids and
Maybe
then,
don't write a book about consuming children. I think that's probably a better
is that a
option.
bad thing? I don't know. I'm always confused by you Americans about what you think is okay and not okay. So
A recent big story started off with "Eat the children" as their tagline, where it starts off as a baby demon, eating the other baby demons.
Yeah.
I think it's Rise of the Devourer. So, speaking of eating babies,
It's one of the Devour. There was 2 Devour books that came out at the same time, and I can't remember which one it was.
One of them.
Yeah, but yeah, I remember. Yeah, I mean, if it's a demon baby, I suppose you could eat the demon baby.
just don't make it a dog. You can't eat puppies. Eat children first, because people get more upset about puppies having injuries than they do about actual humans. So just be careful that you're not doing puppies.
They reference that with the time travel in the MCU, where like the guy that plays like War Machine was like, "Well, why don't we just find baby Thanos?" And I don't know. I mean, it's not the worst idea. I don't know personally.
Well, so and that gets into the moral dilemmas of, can you punish someone for something they haven't done yet, even though they're going to do it?
I feel like the greatest answer for that was in Minority Report, where like at the beginning, Tom Cruise rolls that ball and the other guy catches it and he goes, "Why did you catch it?" And he's like, "Because it was going to fall." He's like, "Or would it have fallen anyway? Or did I make you do it?"
I thought the Minority Report did a really good job of presenting the issue, but I don't know if they actually came up with a solution for it.
No, in no way did they do. No way did they do it at all.
Because it was one of those, like, if we know you're going to do it and it's 100% you're going to do it, can we punish you even though you haven't done it yet?
Yeah.
Even then, and then you draw into question of, well, is it 100% that they're going to do it? So anyway, not really relevant to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
But interesting to think about. Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna talk about, like, what's the best system that you guys have seen of doing health in a video game way in a lit RPG, where it kind of meets those video game expectations of like HP being like a buffer before you start taking actual damage or whatever. I know I saw that one in it's a post-apocalyptic. I can't remember which one it was, but
I feel like He Who Fights with Monsters has a really like tight and clean system, because he's basically like, you're not a person anymore. You're this just magical being. So it's really tight and neat and tidy, but I don't think it's as fun as like trying to like figure out a way to like weave the magic through you so you can do whatever things. Because you want the blood and the gore and the humanity of it. Because if you're just this like magical thing, I don't know, it feels like it lowers the stakes a little bit for me. I don't know. Yeah. But it's really neat and tidy.
I think in terms of stakes, you have to make a conscious decision when you're writing the world whether you want a low stakes world or a high stakes world. So is healing readily accessible, easy, so you can throw your character into crazy situations, they'll come out fine? Or do you want the tension of very little healing, so any injury is very significant? I like the first one, because then you can do more crazy shit, but really anyone can write either.
I feel like the Wuxia things work really, really well, where it's like you can heal certain things, but then when you get to like a higher like let's say you take a wound and the guy has like, he's high into the law of might, it's like that infects the wound, and so you need to be even stronger to heal. So it's like you can heal at this level, but then when you get up to this level, maybe you can't until you do again. And It seems kind of nice and elegant. Just basically that there's other factors to consider besides just blood vessels, granulation tissue, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I kind of went far in the other direction where I said no HP, and the main character is a healer. And with how, I've got base rules on, all of my numbers mean something. And I refuse to, torpedo my world building to say, actually, the numbers mean something completely different. Because at that point, the numbers stop meaning anything. The numbers got to mean something. But unfortunately, it's had the effect where the main character is basically running around like Mario with a star, because her healing at this stage is so great that you try to annihilate her, and she's just like, nope, I'm back, fully healed, fully restored. My healing is permanently running through me. She runs around with the Mario star on, and then it's like, okay, how do I make challenges around this? And so it becomes more, threatening everyone else.
Mm.
But that's an issue with getting really granular, not having something like Alaron was discussing about well, there's the different realms, and just having the healing be too powerful, actually, especially centered around the healer herself.
Mm.
That's something to consider as well. You can go too far, and I went a little far, so my challenges have to be revamped.
Yeah, it's the Superman dilemma right there. How do you threaten Superman? You threaten his friends and loved ones, or you do things at the same time so that he can't do both things at the same time. He can't save Lois and save the stadium or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I did kind of I don't know. Injuries are real. Healing magic exists, but it's slow and generally doesn't fix things permanent, like fully all at once. So it's kind of a balance between them where you can get injured, but you're going to be out for a little while, and time is limited. Yes, potatoes.
So Sharon here has another question. How much extra research do you guys do for any of the writing medical scenes that you've encountered? Selkie, why don't you start this one off here?
So it depends on exactly what the problem is and how much I've researched it before. The one that got me on all the watch list was, do you dissolve in acid or do you suffocate first when you get swallowed whole by a dragon? That got me on all the watch lists. Some are really easy and mundane, relatively speaking, where you chop off an arm and that's that. And others I have spent 60 plus hours researching when the main character was saying, I can rebuild myself, I can build a better body. Just researching all of the weird quirks of the human body, how you could possibly make it better. And then, putting all the pieces together and then researching the chemistry even, where, well, if you can start synthesizing different amino acids, how does that change? What does your digestive have to do? What do you do if you want to integrate metal into yourself? How does the blood have to change? How does the plasma concentration have to change? I just went real deep on how all these things went. So it depends on the task. I don't think I'm doing anything that deep again. And unlike my august panelists, I'm not a doctor or a person. So I have to tap my wife and tap the internet quite a lot for this sort of research.
Wait. So you have to tell us now. Do you suffocate or do you burn in acid first?
You suffocate. The acid is actually really weak, especially for dissolving a whole human body. Believe me, time to dissolve a whole human body in acid got me on all the watch lists when I was Googling it. It takes a really long time, actually. And when I was like, okay, it takes more than a day, whatever, they're suffocated by then. Moving on. I don't need the exact timeline. That's just going to get the police actually visit.
Xander, do you need a refresher on the question?
Yes, please.
So they were asking what type of research, how much research did you have to do for writing different medical scenes? Was there any additional research or did you just...
I don't write a ton of medical scenes. I do a lot of injuries and trauma initial responses, but I don't. So I do little bits of research of like things like how hot does this skin need to get before it starts to burn? The random things that like that every author looks up, right? But I don't do a ton of research for that. I do a lot of research for all of my writing in general, so I don't do a ton more research, I guess I should say. I end up on rabbit holes on like plumbing and firearms and wadding and just all sorts of things. Gunpowder. I did like a 2-day research on gunpowder. But yeah, I don't do any extra research for medical scenes more than I would for anything else. So.
Christopher Alleron, did you have any additional?
I mean, I've seen a lot in the hospital, so it's more like if there's something I want to know that I feel like I haven't seen, I'll call one of my buddies that's in that thing, and I'll be like, "How does this actually shake out?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's actually horrifying. That's that's not great." And then you just put those elements in to give it that little bit of realism, that little bit of like gore factor, fun. Everyone's like the morbid curiosity kind of thing, so that it's accountable. But like, I don't ever feel the need to like go like crazy deep. I mean, you think about it, like the top physicists still try to call light either, a photon or like a wavelength because they haven't cracked that yet. So, like you don't want to go like crazy deep into cytokines and other sort of things like that. You're just going to lose people. It sounds like nothing. It sounds like midichlorians. So like just, yeah.
I wrote 3 chapters of redesigning the human body and 2 more of implementing it, and yeah, I lost people.
Yeah, you just it's like it's too much. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I come to writing to get to do something other than my standard work. So if anything, my scenes are probably less realistic than average. Yeah, and I think have a degree of realism, but you don't have to be exactly right if you don't want to be.
No.
So that brings up an interesting thing that we could talk about here is there a point where you're talking about gore factor and that kind of stuff? Where do you guys feel the line is about how much is too much, either in detail or in graphicness of either turning your readers off completely or, maybe we already discussed the boring them to death with the medical jargon?
I'm going to go, I'll start off. It's all about reader expectations. So you set your reader expectations and you need to maintain those reader expectations throughout your books. So if you start off, with, the occasional gory scene, you can add gory scenes later on. If you don't have gore and then you suddenly add gore, you're breaking your reader expectation and it's going to lose readers. Whereas the same thing is if you have a lot of gore and you get rid of gore, you're going to lose readers because your reader expectations aren't being met. So it's all about balancing your reader expectations, making sure that they know what they're getting into, making sure that they are getting what they're expecting.
Anyone else feel like coming in? Yeah,
it depends on like what your purpose is. I like violent movies and stuff like that, and I feel like a lot of my readers are into it, so I've established that. But then the worst things that I've written is like when I feel like it's a very pivotal scene. I described in one of my books a scene of sexual assault, which was honestly like kind of still like brings a little bile to the back of my throat, but I did it because I feel like in real life we don't confront what too many people have to do on a regular basis. So I wanted it to be so horrifying that like it made an impact on human beings. And honestly, I got both sides. I got from men and women, thank you for writing that, thank you for not. And so it was just sort of, I think it depends on like what is the purpose that you're looking for it behind.
Right. Yeah. Christopher?
So going back to what Xander was saying about expectations, I'm reading The Good Guys by Eric Uegland at the moment, and I expect it to be a scene where he has to comb the gore out of his beard in exquisite detail in most books, and I'm okay with that. I enjoy it, but you can't throw that in a lot of other books.
So, do you have anything to add? Or
yes, actually. So I write first person, and I actually use gore moments as a way to show what the character feels and thinks about it. If the description, the description is sometimes really close and intimate, and oh my God, this is happening. Oh, yeah, how do I fix it? And sometimes it's really far back, detached, clinical. There's a separated arm and all of the associated things. Okay, need to heal it with this. There's a, and I can just show into the character's mindset and how she thinks about it and how close she is to the people and the injuries and how worried she's about it by how clinical she's being about it or how close she's being about it. The description shows the character's mindset. And so I find it's a good moment to not only weave, the actual thing that's going on, the blood, the gore going everywhere, but also have a character moment at the same time.
That's really interesting. So we have this situation here where we talk about "'Tis but a scratch," and I believe that that's a reference to Monty Python and the battle between the two knights, and he's lopping off limbs, and the guy's like, "It's just a scratch," and it was the shock factor. I mean, especially back in the day when all of a sudden this guy's arm comes off and it's just shooting out blood. And so, do you feel that you're able to get away with adding more gore if you combine it with comedy? Or do you feel that that's something that maybe should be shied away from? I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that kind of idea of gore versus comedy, or whether the two should be combined. Alaram, why don't you start us off?
I mean, I think comedy is sort of the greatest thing ever in the world. My goal for life is to have a life filled with laughter, so I would want to incorporate it into everything. When I was younger, I would get in trouble because they'd be like, "You were laughing," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, sex should have laughter in it," and they didn't quite understand it. But I feel like they came to my side at the end. So I feel like you put it in a little bit of everything, but like not to the point that like it defeats the purpose. Like for me, everything is like very purpose driven about like I'm trying to accomplish this. So like even having like scenes where it's like you have like violence and comedy and violence and comedy, it hits even harder when you just completely lack comedy. You can even have a character be like, oh, like looking for the other person to make a joke, and you're like, no, not this time. And then it
Yeah.
hits even better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Christopher?
I think I'll just throw back to the Monty Python reference, and it's actually a really deep cut because he says it's but a scratch, but in medieval times, a scratch could have been lethal. You could have hit yourself with some tetanus, could have get infected, get sepsis. So
Yeah.
scratch was actually pretty lethal back in those days. I write inherently comical stuff, so I guess I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, I think the comedy does buffer gore. I think it's a good addition if you want to.
Yeah. That is a very interesting thing because, I mean, they talk about how do you know he's a king? Well, he isn't covered in shit because, yeah, that's essentially it, right? Like, that's what their lives were like, was that,
Yeah.
constant worry of infection and getting sick far more than you were worried about getting an arm or a limb cut off.
And then
Xander?
there's the whole like bring out your dead, and
Yeah.
they're just like, just piling them up, and it's a whole
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, like it seemed pretty grim.
Yeah,
It was.
obviously, anytime you add comedy, you're going to reduce the other emotions of like comedy as an element is more it serves as an equalizer or a middle grounder. So anytime you can add comedy in to kind of lessen a blow or lessen an emotional impact, and that's kind of what it does. Is it brings everything back to center for people. It allows them to kind of refocus and recenter their things. So whenever you bring comedy into a story, you're going to lessen the impact of the gore, of the trauma of anything, because that's what comedy is designed to do for human bodies physiologically, is it to bring us back to homeostasis.
I mean, I think that by lessening it though, you might be able to cut through the noise.
Sure.
I feel like especially like these days, everyone's so triggered all of the time, and it's the comedians honestly that I feel like are speaking at more truth about topics on like both sides of anything that are kind of cutting through. They're saying not too different from what like the talk like somebody like just the what am I trying like a straight man like like not he's not saying anything interesting, but with the comedy you're able to reach people.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's absolutely true. The court jester's job was to say the hard things
Yeah.
for the king, so that that no one else could say, because they would be killed otherwise. So you say those hard things with a comedic bent, so that you can actually get that point across, get that stance across, because that was the whole. You can say a lot harsher things in comedy than you can
Yes.
say without comedy, and so you get to those you could bite through a lot of the bureaucratic bullshit to get to the heart of the matter is a lot easier with comedy than you can with other things.
There was actually an elegant example just now in the latest Loki where He Who Remains, who's who's black, was like presenting something, and there's like this white guy from the crowd who goes, "What do you know about it, boy?" And he goes, "Well, the answer is more than you." And everyone goes, oh, "Might think." And it's just like it's a very clear like fuck you, but like he gets away with it because even in that time period, he like adds a little bit of like comedy on it. I mean, Animal Farm, which very clearly to us is an allegory, but like apparently got through in a time where he could have been murdered for that. Yeah, I mean, it softens it so that it can be received, I think, and so it's so necessary.
Yeah, I saw a British comedian that was talking about Erdogan, the Turkish leader, and apparently there's something like 35,000 instances of people talking about Erdogan in a negative way that they're investigating by their police. But so he did it on the BBC as a means of expressing satire law and saying this is how far you can go with satire law. And then I think he was actually a German guy. Now that I think about it, because Angela Merkel got mad at him. But yeah, so there's that element of comedy being able to do things that we couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah.
Silky, do you have an example, and all of you, if you have one, but Silky, do you have an example either in your own writing or in somewhere else's where you particularly appreciated using comedy to lessen the blow of an injury or something graphic or horrible that could have happened?
So there was the Axe body spray, example earlier, but that's really the only time I've included comedy in the gore and the medicine. With the conceit of my story, my Gorometer is stuck on 11. And, there is no comedy to soften the blow. Some of it is, I just hit the readers with, look, when you break something, when stuff goes horribly wrong, when you get impaled, when you break your back, it is going to hurt, and this is what it looks like. And obviously, I have not actually worked in the ED. I've gotten stories from my wife who's worked in the ED, but I've not actually been there. So I can't quite get the same essence, but I try because, again, it's what my story is. So I have very little to say on comedy softening gore because I don't really do it.
Okay. Anyone else have one, or should we move on to another question?
I use one character just as a comedic character most of the time, but if something is really grim, instead of him saying something funny, I will have him say something occasionally deep. And it's more impactful that way because normally he's the guy for a laugh, but occasionally have a deep insight, and that's how I use comedy to sometimes adjust the blow.
I think the classic example for me is always going to be Benvolio in Romeo and Juliet. When Benvolio dies and he says, "Hey, Nye is not too deep, not as wide as a church door or a stable, but it's deep enough." And then, he a very comedic response to someone on their deathbed, having just been killed and just slowly bleeding to death. But I think that's probably the classic example that I can think of.
That's a good one, yeah. Okay, so we have some more questions here. Let me try and grab one. How important is it to get gunshot wounds right in your books? Most characters seem to shrug them off. This is from James.
I think media has kind of inured us to gunshot wounds, and so people expect guns to just be easy to shrug off. And so when you start adding actual problems with them, like I remember when I was in the military, we shot someone like 13 times and he didn't go down because he was high on some stuff, and he was dead. He was already dead. Like, we know he was going to die, but he fought for another like 20 minutes.
Wow.
Of just heroin infused rage. So I mean, like there's things that just don't make sense. Like that doesn't. No one's going to see that and be like, that's realistic. Of like some guy taking 60 shots or something like that, which is on record. I think that's the most shots a person has taken before they've died is something like 60. But you can't say that in real life because the suspension of disbelief just doesn't. In a fiction book, you can't use that reality because suspension of disbelief will just say that's not real. There's a weird counterculture there where the media has taught us that things are a certain way and they're not necessarily that way, and so you can't make it too realistic, in my opinion, because people just don't. It triggers their suspension of disbelief.
Anyone else?
So I don't quite have guns, but the rock and metal mages have figured out that accelerating small slugs, does this number on people. And I try to write it. The issue I run into is gunshot wounds are almost boring in a way. When I can, be fireballing someone with an added lightning strike afterwards. The injury tends to be more on the mundane side of things. And it's just like, okay, you've got a hole in you, your sternum's ruined, you're missing a lung, you've, broken ribs, holes, backsplash. Okay, that's real nice. You just fix it and, sort of move on. So it's like, okay, add in some anti-pain skills. And, when everyone's a munchkin and everyone has powers, it starts to get a little funky. It really does. I've been trying to write battles.
I guess this question sort of ties into what I view as like sort of the death knell of most forms of lit RPG or most video games. It's like, yeah, we all, I mean, most of us really enjoy grinding. I've spent hours making iron daggers in Skyrim just to get up to blacksmithing 100 and then enchanting, and it's fun. I don't know why exactly, honestly, but it's fun. And then what's not fun is then making all of this armor and these enchantments and going out and no one can defeat you. It's just, it's kind of, it gets a little boring. So yeah, I think that accountability is important. I think that you want accountability. I think Sanderson had a great quote where he was like, yeah, people ask me all the time how to write a good story. And he's like, if I have to like, just make it simple. It's like, figure out what you want your character to get and then never let them get it. It's just sort of a good thing to do. Yeah.
Oops. I've broken those rules.
It's tougher.
Yeah, you were talking about how you're stuck in a situation where you've made your healers so strong that they're having a challenge. So
social issues are, good. And also she's good at surviving stuff, but that doesn't stop someone punching her in the face. So, how do you hurt Wolverine? Well, you can sort of just ignore him and just let him, run around in circles over here while you go do something over there. And, this Wolverine doesn't actually punch back particularly hard. So,
Wait, all right. So, and if nobody has seen it yet, I fully recommend. This might be the best thing that comes out of this. Google Professor X making fun of Wolverine, and there's this guy who's like, Professor X is like interviewing Wolverine. He goes, "Yeah, no, you're not on the X-Men," and he goes, "But I've got claws made out of metal, which is what our worst enemy, sort of manipulates all the time. I don't know." And he goes, "And I heal really fast, so you have to get beat up first to be useful." It's awesome.
I linked the video, Halloran, if you want to. Is that the video?
It's what is it? Where is it? Hold on.
That's funny. It's great when you see like them trolling, somebody just to like get their guile up. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. It's hilarious. So I don't know. I'd say like if we're talking about like making it real, I would argue that for the various arcs, and there's just a billion of them, the Joker has been the most deadly opponent of Superman. Just like if you look at like
Superman?
the gods of Superman, for
Superman,
the gods among us, like what he does to Superman, as far as just fully corrupting him.
Okay.
Right, like you can kill the hero, right, and dying a hero's death is almost one of the best things you can do for a hero. But to like take everything from them and turn them into something horrible, like that's the real evil of it, right? That's the insidious, like almost like dirty kind of like wonderful feeling that you want out of a villain. Yeah, I don't know.
Somewhat
Taking
like
out
what
something else.
Joker did to Harvey Dent. That was the kind of the plot of the Dark Knight, Dark Knight
Yeah,
Rises.
I mean, I feel like that was a super nerfed version of it.
Right.
But like, yeah, I mean, like that's sort of it. But I mean, and also it didn't quite work because Harvey Dent was always going to be Two-Face. So it was
Mhm.
almost like he was just laying bricks on a street that was already going to be there.
Right.
I don't
You
know.
talking about like Injustice?
Yeah, and
The Injustice
Injustice.
League.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
For
I'm
those
not
of you,
going to ruin this. It's been out for everybody. You guys
yeah.
familiar with this? So he combines fear toxin from Scarecrow with kryptonite and hits Superman with it, and then makes Superman think that Lois Lane is the Joker. So Superman murders Lois Lane right after she got pregnant, and his brain just snaps. And I mean, that's just one of the most horrible written things that I've come across. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to become a tyrant because
And he goes on to just become like a tyrant, all in the name
Yeah.
of good. And it's just
Yeah.
this wonderful development of the classic story, and adds in the, somebody else is asking about mental trauma, and it's like, yeah, you're not necessarily protected from that, or emotional trauma,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think emotional trauma, mental trauma is one of the things that is the least well done in the genre, because people go through, the one that I always hate is when people get like the first time you kill someone, and like the response that a person has the first time they kill someone, like everyone vomits. I don't know of anyone that's like, well, no, that's not true. I knew one sociopath who killed people and was fine with it. But everyone else was like very shaken up about it. Very like there was a mourning period, even though and it's usually after the fight is over and you just realize what you've done. And very few people do that right, but they don't do it. And a lot of people complain about that it being done wrong, but they don't complain about being wrong in the right way, because it man, it's such an insidious thing. It just comes out and it makes you feel like you're just a bad person, and like everything you've done is now tainted, and it just it has a weird way of changing a person after you've killed someone for the first time. And I think that's like the mental trauma that every lit RPG person has gone through, or every lit RPG hero has gone through, is they're all broken. They all have to have been broken, and whether there's therapists around to talk to them, or whether they just take it out in some other way, they're all going to have some sort of broken mental condition that has to be healed at some point.
Do you think, speaking with lit RPG as an umbrella for this, a lot of that, there are worlds where there's just systems and stats, but a number of them, it is an actual game that they're playing. And do you think that trauma would translate the same way when they assume that it's an NPC that they're killing? Because that happens in video games all the time, and it doesn't seem to really negatively affect people, or does it? And yet the reality of how real that VR or whatever is, do you think that would be something that would kind of mitigate that, or would it still be there, be exacerbated?
Studies have shown that it actually makes it easier to kill.
Yeah.
So when you go through a simulated environment, it makes it easier for that person to deal with it.
I mean, you don't even have to go to a simulated environment. Growing up poor in America is very different from growing up affluent in America. And the things that you see, the things that you're confronted with from a very young age, either twist you or make you stronger, or both. I mean, you're never going to sort of get through this whole thing without trauma. But the question is, does it, like, if you're going to use lit RPG terms, does it forge you into something that can withstand it more, or does it twist you into something that inflicts it more? It just sort of depends on the upbringing that we actually have in this world. You can just sort of see how people react to it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it's not hard to understand that if you're fed certain images and experiences, then those alter you to a certain extent. and also desensitize you. In the United States of America, we have a mass shooting every day, and we just don't care anymore. Just don't care. And other countries, when I talk to them, they're like, "Why don't you guys stop?" And I'm like, "Because America, I don't know, but like, we that is an abnormal thing, and yet it is very normal for us now."
Yeah, there's a great book called On Killing by Dave Grossman that talks about this, and they actually after the Vietnam War, they tried to figure out why their soldiers were so traumatized by it, dealing with the whole PTSD thing that they kind of developed after World War II or after the Vietnam War, and they realized that they needed to change how they train, and they started doing these simulated killing environments so that they could become used to it and acclimatized to the concept of killing, and it actually made it much easier. And he actually is a pretty he's got a pretty good stance on no video games violence, because he thinks video game violence is doing the same thing to Americans or to our society that the military had to learn how to do after the 70s. And acclimatizing us to violence, acclimatizing us to killing. So
wow, that's an intense.
Yeah.
That's an intense.
On that note,
I think that, honestly, I think it's an important thing to talk about, because it is something that happens so much in the books that are written, or the things that are going on. And I think that just shoving that stuff under the rug or pretending it doesn't exist isn't serving society. I think that it's great to talk about those things and at least have those discussions. So I thank you guys for opening up and having those thoughts and those discussions about these things. We are at our 5-minute mark, a little bit over now. So what I'm going to allow all of our wonderful, illustrious authors to do is talk about what they have going on, what they're excited about, what they have coming up in the future, and sharing where you can find all of their things and possibly find them, maybe not IRL, but on social media, whatever the case. I mean, if they want to be found IRL, that's entirely up to them. I'll leave it with them. But yeah, let's start with you, Selkie, and we'll move around.
I'm Selkie. I have one project, Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons. I bounce between Kindle Unlimited and Royal Road, just because every once in a while I like to go on Royal Road, grab all of the new readers, and I'm like, okay, got a bunch of new readers. Let's go back to Kindle Unlimited. So right now, until November 1st, there's almost 2 million words on Royal Road. So read really, really, really fast, or have a Kindle Unlimited subscription.
That's awesome. Christopher.
So I'm Christopher. I write under CJ Timms. I have all the usual social media pipes at CJ Timms or CJ Timms Writes. If you want to look into my reading, I have The Ozymandias Apocalypse, which is a post-apocalyptic story set in Australia, or Knights of the North Pole Santa, which is a guy gets isekai reincarnated as Santa at the North Pole and has to cultivate his way to victory. The other thing I'm working on is a podcast called Lit RPG Banter, and I have an open door policy. Whether you're a reader, writer, industry figure, I'm happy to interview you. And yeah, if anyone wants health tips, I'm also over at DocTimsGP on TikTok.
That's awesome. Thank you. Aileron.
So I'm Aileron Kong. I write the Land series. I'm gonna have a 10th book coming out soon, and a 3rd series in my universe, the AKU. And I'm on litrpg.com, and I love hearing from people, so feel free to reach out, and thanks for being here, guys, today. I think it was an important conversation.
It's awesome. Xander.
Xander Boyce, I'm finishing up book 4 of not finishing up, but I'm working on book 4 of the Red Mage series. Got book 1 of Freshman Drive, which is a basketball lit RPG, coming out here in audio sometime in a couple months, March, I think, or April. And you can find me on Facebook, on Discord, or Reddit. It's a pretty good way to get a hold of me as well. So DM Xanadu on Reddit.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us and some of the great questions that came about. Thank you to our panelists, guests who were able to give us some insight into the medical profession and how we deal with all of these things coming in our books. I want to say again, thank you so much to Geneva, who has been behind the scenes tirelessly working towards making sure that everything runs smoothly and putting up these links and posts and questions and just doing everything that we need done so that this con can be successful as it has been. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody.
See ya. Thanks for coming, guys. It's nice to meet you all.